Thank you so much for joining me here today. As we go through today's video, or heck, right now, start off by giving a like for this video down below, because that will show GMAT Club that you like having us here, and then they'll be more likely to ask us back. All right, so with that out of the way, hello everyone, my name is Maria Wich-Vila, and today we are going to be talking about the resume in your MBA application. So here's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I'm going to tell you what the importance is of the resume in the application. Just how important is it anyway? Is it just something they kind of look at really quickly and then throw aside, or is it in fact a more pivotal piece of your candidacy? What is the purpose of the resume in the eyes of the admissions committee? Why do they even really ask for it? Then we're going to talk about lots of different tips to make your resume as powerful as possible. So how do you incorporate your overall application strategy into the resume? And then I'm going to give you lots of little tips to make your resume as skimmable and easy on the eye as possible. But first of all, who am I? That's me. Hi. I'm Maria Wich-Vila. I'm a 2005 graduate of Harvard Business School, and I am the founder of ApplicantLab.com, which is the effective, efficient, and affordable alternative to traditional MBA admissions consulting. It is a DIY, do-it-yourself platform that walks you through my best guidance, step-by-step, on how to assemble the strongest application possible. So let's jump in. What are the key pieces of an MBA application, right? Just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Some of you might have already applied in the past. Some of you might be just starting your MBA application journey. So let's just start off by looking at what are all the different pieces that go into an application, right? So first of all, there are the quantitative elements, your GMAT or GRE score and your GPA and grades from your undergraduate. Then you're going to need to write one or more essays. The resume, which is why we're here today. You're going to need usually 2 letters of recommendation. I think that was my last session. So if you want some advice on that, click on back and check out that other video from me. And then the application form usually has a bunch of like little short answer questions, little text boxes that you need to fill in about your background or your responsibilities or what have you. And then, should these written elements of your application be successful, you will then be invited to the interview. So when we talk about the MBA application, usually this is what people are like, yeah, Maria, I know all this. But there are also some sort of invisible elements of the application that sort of tie all of these pieces together. And those are the career vision. What is it you want to do in the world? What kind of impact do you want to have? Why do you need an MBA to get there? A lot of career visions actually don't need the MBA, so you need to make that case pretty strongly. And then why an MBA from this school? What is it about this particular school that you think is going to get you where you need to go? And then in the middle of everything, I put it in the center on purpose, is leadership. Showing admissions committees that you are a positive, motivational leader wherever you go is one of the key things they are looking for. So even if you're aware that these are all the things that are important in an application, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that all of these pieces match together. And in fact, they all have to sort of be moving in the same direction for your application to be a well-oiled machine, right? So for example, if the career vision, let's say that your career vision is, I want to start working in marketing, but the other elements of your application, like your resume, only focus not on your creativity or your ability to understand customers, but only focuses on, say, your quantitative skills, then the career vision is one that involves a lot of creativity and compassion and empathy with customers, but the resume is showing and focusing on skills that are nice but not relevant. Then those 2 pieces of the gears are going to start going in opposite directions, and the entire machinery of your application is going to come screeching to a grinding halt. So you need all of the pieces of your application to be flowing together in harmony. So speaking of all of these different pieces of the application, how important are they anyway? Should we guess? Should we sort of make an estimation? We don't have to, because several years ago, GMAC, the organization that issues the GMAT exam, asked MBA admissions officers from about 100 US business schools how much percentage of importance they would allocate to each of these different pieces of a candidate's application in terms of how important it is in making their decision. And here's what they said. First of all, the GMAT, 20%, or GRE, whatever that sort of standardized test is. GPA, or previous academic achievement, is 18%. These are on the left-hand side because these are sort of like the quantitative, these are sort of hard and fast numbers, right? You calculate them and your score is either X or Y. But on the right-hand side of the screen, we have the more subjective elements of the application. These are the sort of more human elements that are based primarily on communication and less on a hard and fast number. So we've got the interview at 21%, the resume at 15%, the essays at 11%, the recommendations at 8%, and those little short answer boxes I talked about a minute ago are 3%. Now, usually at this part of the presentation, people will sort of react with a little bit of surprise because they'll say, oh my gosh, the resume is 15%. So it's funny because when you start looking into like the excellent advice being given in GMAT Club message boards, there's so much emphasis on the essays. What am I going to write in my essay? What should I do on this essay? But in fact, the resume is more important than the essays. And this is something that often shocks people. If this shocks you and you're like, wow, this is a cool thing to know, give me a little like below. Again, we're trying to get the enthusiasm up on GMAT Club's part to keep asking us back. But anyway, so why is the resume more important than the essays? Is that weird? No, it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because the essays are going to give you opportunities to describe your previous experiences, right? To tell them details about how you accomplished certain things. But if I just read the essays without the resume, I am not going to have any context whatsoever for where do you work? What's your job? What are your day-to-day responsibilities? So the essays are almost kind of floating conceptually in space without the resume to anchor it and to give the reader a very concrete idea of where your career has been so far. So the resume tells them a lot about what you've done and how you've done it, and then the essays allow you to go into more detail. So the resume is usually the first document that most MBA admissions committees look at. So hopefully I've been able to convince you that this is in fact a very important part of your application. Quick side note, I don't know if you're watching this on YouTube in the future, then this might not be applicable, but as of right now, it is March 1st, I think. So the round 1 deadlines aren't for another sort of 6 or 7 months, and then the round 2 deadlines are beyond that. So you might be saying to yourself, well, the deadline's so far away, Maria. Why are we even talking about this now? Well, I'll tell you, because a key part of your application is also networking. I'm going to ask you, and you're going to see all of the advice for this in ApplicantLab, but just in case, you are going to want to network with current students at a minimum, alumni if you can find them, your resume twins. And when I say resume twin, I mean people whose pre-MBA backgrounds were very similar to your pre-MBA background before they went to business school, right? Because that shows you if they ended up getting into school X, that's an indication for you that school X is in fact open to people from backgrounds like yours. And then also people whose careers you want to emulate, right? I want you to reach out to a few people who have jobs where you're like, wow, that's a really cool job. I want that job. And if they have MBAs, you can reach out to them and say, hey, how did your MBA help you get there as part of your research? So as you reach out to them, if you send them like this kind of like, hey, my name's Maria and I'm interested in the television industry and I would love to chat with you about your MBA experience. I've attached my resume for your reference. If you send them a resume that is like hard to read or has a bunch of information that doesn't really matter, right? They're going to be like, ugh, right? So by sending them a clean, easy to read, impactful resume, now you'll be more likely to get that sort of positive response from the people when you try to network with them. Now, when we talk about how important the resume is, and it's actually more important than the essays, sometimes people have said in the past, I sometimes give this presentation live in front of, audiences of applicants. And when I first started doing this years ago, someone raised their hand and they were like, Maria, this is amazing news for me because my current resume is amazing. My resume is actually pretty awesome. And I know that it's awesome because my resume got me my current job. And since I got me my current job, it's got to be a pretty strong resume. This is actually a common blunder, thinking that I'm just going to take my existing resume from my last job search, maybe update it a little bit, and then submit that, and easy peasy, I'm done. Using the same resume for your MBA application that you would use in a job search is a terrible mistake. don't do it. And why is this? Well, let's think a little bit about what the goal is of the resume for a job hunt versus the goal of the resume for an MBA admissions committee. So let's imagine that this is you today, looking good. I like that color on you. It's a nice blue. You look good in blue. And so you have a job that you do today. And that job is, frankly, kind of on the junior side, or probably more junior than you would want it to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be applying for the MBA anyway, right? So you've got this job and you're doing your tasks and you're really good at your job. And let's say I reach out to you as a recruiter or as a hiring manager. Since most people only stay at a job for about 2 years, as a hiring manager, my big question is, what can you do for me tomorrow? And what skills do I think you're going to grow into in the next 1 to 2 years? And I don't really think beyond that, because usually I know that you're going to leave on average. Most people leave a job after 2 years, right? That's kind of the average. So when I'm looking at your resume and looking at your candidacy, I'm looking at your current responsibilities and I'm asking myself, okay, can this person do a slightly higher level version of the responsibilities they have today? Therefore, when you're job hunting, it is very important to give a detailed explanation of how many programming languages you know and how many, database. I know SQL and I know Tableau and I know Excel and I have all these skills, right? Makes perfect sense. However, the admissions committee is not looking at you through the same lens. For the purposes of the MBA application, the admissions committee is not thinking so much about where you're going to be in 1 to 2 years. They're thinking about who are you going to be in 20 years. Because admissions committees are basically looking for people who have already demonstrated that they are on their way up the corporate ladder or the business world or the nonprofit world or what have you. Which makes sense, because at the end of the day, they want you to end up being the CEO of YouTube or whatever. I think the CEO of YouTube went to UCLA Anderson. And so if you go to the UCLA Anderson website, guess what? They've got a big picture of her, because of course they want you to become an illustrious alumnus or alumna. So they're trying to think to themselves, okay, is this person 20 years from now going to be on the cover of Forbes? And then our school is going to look super good compared to other business schools. And so how do they try to figure out if you're going to be successful or that C-suite executive in 20 years? They look for those key business leadership skills, because 20 years from now, that functional day-to-day aspects of your job, like Excel or entering in the Google AdWords in the AdWords interface, or debugging JavaScript, whatever, you're not going to be doing that hopefully in 20 years, right? You'll be doing much more senior things. So they're looking at your innate leadership abilities to see if they think that you've got what it takes to advance to that level in the future. So let's take an example. I know that might have been a little kind of not concrete. So we've got a concrete example. It's not a hypothetical example. It is 100% true, because it's my husband. And he looks a lot like you. Look at him. So in 2001, when he was applying to business school, yeah, we're old, he was a financial analyst for a movie studio. And so when he was applying, what defined success in his job as a finance business development analyst? Success was predicated upon his ability to do Microsoft Excel, build financial models, and then create these kind of industry projections of what do we think the box office is going to be for this movie and whatever. Now, today, he is the CFO of a company that makes movies. And today, he's not really doing the stuff on the left-hand side of the screen anymore, right? Sure, he has to do a little bit in Excel here and there, but today, what defines him as successful as a CEO? The things that made him successful 20 years ago are not the same things that make him successful today. Today, he's successful if he can, for example, persuade his CEO to do something different. He has to negotiate with banks constantly, right? He is managing sort of a $500 million credit facility, and that actually requires constant relationship management with banks to convince them to give him more money. He has to smooth over internal squabbles, right? So you can imagine, as a CFO, one department says, the marketing department says, oh, we need to hire 3 more people because we're too overworked. And then another department says, we need to hire 3 more people because we're too overworked. And so if one department gets a new hire, then the other department is like, well, why were they able to get, we're just as busy as they are. Why did they get this? And why? It happens a lot. So he has to smooth that over. That's not something he had to do 20 years ago, but it's something he has to do today. And he's also one of the key people on his company staff setting the strategic vision. He doesn't need to do the stuff on the left anymore because he has junior team members that do this. And so why does this matter for your MBA application resume? In very pragmatic terms, do not focus your MBA application resume on these sort of technical skills of your day-to-day job today. Instead, try to focus as much as possible on showing that you have the personality traits necessary to eventually become a high-level executive. So this brings us to our first concrete tip of the day. Don't focus on junior skills. So don't waste my time with a summary of qualifications section. Right? Don't say, oh, I'm an experienced, coder who has whatever. I'm not hiring you to be a coder. I'm hiring you to be an executive in the future. Don't bother with a skills section. Don't list at the bottom programming languages, C++, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails. No, don't say Microsoft Office, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, or things like Google AdWords or Tableau, any of that. Don't waste my time with that, because if your career is going to be the kind of career I want it to be as an admissions officer, 20 years from now, you're not going to be doing that stuff, right? You're going to have people who do that for you. And also, don't waste any bullet points on what I call, quote unquote, secretarial or janitorial aspects of your job. And I don't mean that you're literally a secretary or literally the person, cleaning the floors. What I mean by that is anything that involves something very basic that an administrative assistant could do. So, collecting information from different parties and putting that information together into a document, or janitorial, any sort of cleanup, right? So anything like, I'm in charge of finding bugs in the code, and then I fix the bugs. I clean up the code. Or I'm responsible for reading over our grant funding proposals and finding typos in the proposal. Don't focus on those sorts of skills, because I don't want them to associate you with being the low-level person. I want to focus their very limited attention on those greatest hits. So now it's only fair. I used my husband a second ago. It's only fair that I use my own career now as an example. So when I was applying to business school, one of the key emphases on my resume was that I had spent several months in India working on the business plan for a business that we were internally calling iSky-B for India Sky Broadcasting. Today, it's known as Tata Sky. It's basically, for those of you who've never heard of Tata Sky, it's like DirecTV, but for India. And it's currently about an $800 million a year business. And I was responsible for building the first financial model to prove that Tata Sky would be a viable business, right? This was a pretty big deal. I'm not going to lie. And it was a pretty cool thing. That was a big part of my job. But there were also kind of smaller, more secretarial / janitorial aspects of my job. For example, as the junior-most person on the team, I was also responsible for, I just put a little image up on the lower right-hand side of the screen. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like a little machine that you print out presentations and then you put the papers together, and it kind of puts that, that little plastic curly Q thing to assemble the pages together. That's what that little machine does. So another part of my job when I was applying to business school was also every time we had a board meeting, as the junior-most person, I was responsible to stay until 2 a.m, look at the PowerPoint slides, correct any typos, print the PowerPoint slides, collate the PowerPoint slides, put them together, etc. So let me ask you, do you think on my resume that I included that right-hand side responsibility? I didn't even put it on there. It was nowhere to be found anywhere in my application, because I would rather spend that precious space, right? Remember, the resume is going to be, it's 1 page long. Don't go more than 1 page. It's 1 page of paper. I did not want to spend any of that precious, precious resume space distracting them and have them think of me as oh, is she just this low-level lackey? No, it's kind of like misdirection, as a magician. Look over here. I want you to look at this shiny, sexy project that I worked on, and let's not really focus on that kind of more lower level task that I did. So I want this to be the same thing for you. I don't know if this is useful for you or not so far, but if it is, again, let's give a little like below. So let's go on to a actual concrete example. This is based on a real person. I've, of course, changed the identifying information. But let's say that there is someone who is a software engineer who's applying to business school. So they go through the ApplicantLab modules and the exercises. And so this person says, okay, the strengths and weaknesses module is telling me that I have a technical job. And oftentimes the technical parts of my job are not that interesting to admissions committees. My career vision is that I one day want to become an entrepreneur in the financial services industry. This is also an industry that now is being referred to as fintech, right? So let's say that she is a software engineer. She wants to one day start her own fintech company. And why does she need the MBA? Well, she needs to learn some startup skills and fundraising skills and all that jazz. So let's pretend that this is her initial, like sort of the top part of her resume for her current job. So she works for Sample Tech Inc. She's worked there since 2015. She's a senior software engineer. And let's look at these 2 bullet points on her original job hunting resume. Built data import API for the Playa Vista database module, the PVDM. And I thoroughly tested all solutions to ensure compliance. So I'm going to give you guys a second to, in the comments, based on some of what I've been telling you so far, what do you think is wrong with this sample resume? I'll give you about 5 or 10 seconds to type that in while I grab a sip of coffee. Okay. I can't actually see your comments, so I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to assume that at least one person has written a comment. All right, so now let's dissect what is suboptimal about this example that we put here. Let's start off with the Sample Tech Inc. I have never heard of Sample Tech Inc., right? Your industry or your business might be a very big deal in your existing industry, but if you're applying to, say, Dartmouth Tuck, what is the chances that an admissions officer sitting in Hanover, New Hampshire has heard of your company? Sometimes it's not that great, right? So I've never heard of Sample Tech. So I don't know, is Sample Tech big? Is it a huge Fortune 500 company? Is it a teeny business? Is it focused on a niche domestic market? Is it global? Does it create banking security solutions, or is it like a fashion tutorial company, right? The title's so vague, I can't figure it out. And if it's part of a big company, what does it do? Where does it fit within that broader organization? So even if a second ago you started ignoring me because you're like, well, whatever, I work for Google, so everyone's heard of Google, or I work for JP Morgan and everyone's heard of JP Morgan, not so fast. Google is huge. JP Morgan is huge. JP Morgan has investment banking, trading, debt. There's an IT division of JP Morgan that is, like there's so many different, there's like 20 zillion different divisions and offices of these big companies. So for the smaller company people, it's about helping the admissions committee understand right off the bat, here's what my company is, you've never heard of it. For people who work for big companies, you're not off the hook either. Instead of telling them like JP Morgan is a $40 zillion company, they already know that. Your challenge is to explain to them, well, within this $40 zillion company, where do I sit? Which division, which department do I sit in? Because otherwise they're going to be like, I don't know, there's like 4 million offices and 5 zillion employees. How do we know where you fit in that organization? So how can we fix this? Our applicant here could fix this by saying something like the following, right underneath her title. I want you to put something like Sample Tech Inc. is the $30 million European division of Larger Corp, which is in fact a publicly traded company, and it creates software solutions for the banking industry. Now, why did I have her include the information about the banking industry? Well, by adding this line into the resume, I now know that this company is a division of a larger corporation. It has pretty significant revenue. It's not a small potatoes thing. And I know what it actually does. And thinking back, remember those gears that I showed fitting together? There's a career vision tie-in here. Because since this applicant wants to be a fintech entrepreneur, it is very relevant that she has worked on banking industry applications. Because there's a tie-in, right? So now as an admissions officer, I'm like, oh, banking is actually a really complicated industry. There's a million different laws and regulations, but she's already familiar with some of them because she's worked in that industry. Okay, now I feel more confident that she'll be successful as a fintech entrepreneur. Now let's go down to that first bullet point. Built data import API for the Playa Vista database module, PVDM. Admittedly, this one's a little bit of overkill. So this is the one that people normally are like, yeah, we get it, Maria. Okay, so obviously what's an API, right? Most admissions officers come from human resource backgrounds. So they've never, they might like computers, but very few of them have ever coded a line of code in their lives. And perhaps more importantly than what is an API, how did you build whatever an API might be? How did you build it? Were you by yourself, locked in a corner, in your cubicle, not talking to anyone? Or were teamwork skills involved? Were you, in fact, working with others, motivating others, and getting people to collaborate and work together to reach this shared goal? I have no idea what the PVDM is. So it's bad enough to have any sort of technical jargon in your application that they might know. It's even worse. Sometimes people are so used to like their internal tools. A lot of big companies, right? They make their own internal tools that they'll then reference the internal tool. So if I don't know what an API is, how am I supposed to know what your internal company tool, the PVDM is? Oh, forget it. There's no way they're going to know. And not to be rude, but at the end of the day, why should I care that you built an API? So what? How does the API thing help the business? How is the business better off because you spent your precious time doing this? So here's how you need to do this. You need to start your bullet points on your resume by explaining the impact that your project or accomplishment had. So start the bullet point by answering the question, so what? So what? Well, I'll tell you, so what? I helped increase company revenue by 15% by, instead of building an API, I identified an opportunity to build a new product that would expand our customer base. What the product does, what coding language it was built in, who cares? It's a new product. That's all you need to know. That expanded our customer base. Notice also that this person added in the word identifying an opportunity. That is, she came up with the idea herself. It's not like her boss went to her and said, hey, I need you to build this by Friday. I mean, that's okay, but it's even better if she takes that initiative and demonstrates that internal innovation to identify new solutions. Moving on, coordinated a team of 5 to build the product and successfully pitched it to new clients. Now, is this all she did as part of this project? No, there was probably a million other things that she did. She probably had meetings and deadlines and budgets and Gantt charts and stand-ups and whatever. But why do we very strategically select these details to put into the resume? First of all, it's answering so what. It describes what she did in plain English. It highlights the leadership of others, even if indirect, right? If you were sort of running a project, even though you were not technically the project leader, you can use terms like coordinated or managed a team to show that you were in fact like the person trying to get everyone, all the ducks in a row, as it were. And once again, that career vision tie-in. As a future fintech entrepreneur, I've underlined certain key skills that all entrepreneurs are going to need, right? Entrepreneurs need to identify new opportunities. They need to know how to grow a customer base, and they need to know how to pitch. Pitching their ideas to clients, pitching the ideas to VC, pitch. That's what entrepreneurs do all day long. So we were very strategic in choosing the aspects of that project that show leadership in general and that tie in to making me feel more comfortable. Like, okay, she's got what it takes to be, an entrepreneur. Then this other bullet point, thoroughly tested all solutions to ensure compliance. Ugh, isn't it obvious? Like, don't most people double check their work before they do it? Like, I don't always, but I mean, most of us do, right? If you're about to send something to your boss, don't you usually give it like a 1-over? So saying that you tested the software is kind of like low level, right? Isn't it a little too junior to mention? It sort of dilutes the story a little. Now, instead of seeing her as this creative visionary who propelled the team forward to build this new product, it's like, womp, womp, I'm also the QA tester. No, you don't want to be associated with that low level stuff because in the long term, a tech CEO is not going to be doing the QA. So how did we change this bullet point? We didn't change it. We just deleted it to reallocate that precious space somewhere else. Your resume is better off, and this is counterintuitive for some people, which is why I'm going to say this part slowly for emphasis. Your resume is better off with fewer bullet points, but each bullet point being as impactful as possible. If your current resume has something like 7 bullet points for your current job, go through each one and ask yourself, does it answer so what? Does it show me leading others? Does it show me being innovative? I'd rather have a bullet point sort of explain, like if we go down here, so this is sort of like the before and after, right? See how now increased company revenue by 15%, blah, blah, how this is now taking up 2 lines instead of 1 line. I'd rather have one bullet point that takes up 2 lines, but it is much more powerful than 1 or 2 lines that are a lot weaker. So now, time for a pop quiz. In the comments, let me know. This is also my time to get my second sip of coffee. How much time do you think is spent reading that submitted application? That not like total throughout the application process, because the further your application goes in the process, the more and more people are going to read it and reread it. But for that first time they read it, right? Most schools will have 2 initial readers. Those 2 initial readers will come up with a gut feel, not accept, but move forward, maybe waitlist, reject. And if both readers come to the same conclusion, then, if both readers say move forward, then that person automatically moves forward. If both readers say reject, that person gets rejected. If the readers disagree, then usually at that point, a third reader comes in and makes the ultimate decision to move forward or to reject. So how much time do you think is spent on that first read through of the application? I picked up my coffee, but I forgot to drink it. Now I'm going to do that part now. Okay. Well, here's what we wish would happen. In an ideal world, it's 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. Look, it's the admissions officer. There she is. She is so well rested. She just spent the weekend at a relaxing spa. Her desk is clear. Her computer is turned off. There are no emails or notifications to bother her. She's got her entire morning calendar clear to just look at your application. In fact, she's going to pay so much attention to your application that, look, what's that in her hand? A tiny magnifying glass. That's how detailed she's going to pore over every word of your application. This is what we wish admissions officers were like. This is what admissions officers wish their lives looked like. However, I've got lots of friends who are admissions officers that I've met through the years at admissions conferences, and their lives don't look like this, peaceful scene. Their lives look a little bit more like this. Admissions officers are constantly traveling all over the world to the MBA booths. And if you've ever been to like an MBA fair filled with like 50 schools at the tables and all the people, all of those people are admissions officers. So they have to travel all over the world to the booths. People email questions all day long to admissions, so someone's got to answer them. People are like, my login doesn't work, or blah, blah, blah. My recommender just, fled the country. What do I do? So, and not only that, but most readers, admissions readers, are given a quota of how many applications they have to get through in a given day, right? Harvard Business School has 10,000 applications a year that it needs to get through. And they only have, they don't hire like alumni or current students to do it. So that's like hundreds and hundreds of applications a week that each individual admissions officer has to go through. So it's like this sort of oppressive amount of paperwork that has to be gone, they have to go through. So this is a thought exercise I want you to use with your resume. Not just your resume, but your essay too. Don't imagine when you're picturing the person on the other end of that screen who's going to be reading that resume. I don't want you to imagine someone who looks like this. I want you to imagine someone who looks like this, right? Who's just literally being crushed by paperwork. And it's not 9 a.m. on a Monday morning like this lovely woman. No, no, no. It's 6:40 p.m. on a Friday night. And your application, the person's about to leave. They have a huge, awesome weekend plan. They are going to go see the new Top Gun movie. That's me putting in my husband's company is the one making the Top Gun movie coming out in a few months. So see, oh, guerrilla marketing. Yay. Okay. He's going to go see the Top Gun movie. He's so excited. And then he thinks to himself, you know what? Let's just do one more. Just one last candidate before I head out the door for the weekend. So I want you to imagine that this person reading your resume has read about, let's say, I don't know, 150 other applications that week. They are dying to get out of the office to see that awesome movie. Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine that you are the admissions officer and it's 6:40 p.m. on a Friday. You've got this amazing weekend ahead planned for you. You have one last file. Let's just go through one more. You open up the file, you pull up the PDF, and you go to the resume, and the resume looks something like this. How would you react if you saw a resume that looked like this? And it's blurry. Don't try to read it. I know you might be squinting right now you can't read it. I blurred it out on purpose because I'm not talking about specific wording here. I'm talking about what is that initial visceral reaction that you have to a piece of paper that is filled from top to bottom with text. Would your reaction be, oh, hot diggity, I can't wait to dig into this 6-point font, jam-packed piece of paper, woohoo! Is that going to be your reaction? That's not going to be your reaction. I wouldn't feel that way. You wouldn't feel that way. And guess what? They don't feel that way either because they're people too. Imagine that instead you get a resume that looks more like the one on the right. I think your reaction would be more like, okay, this is nice. This is manageable. This is doable. Instead of like, oh, not the thing on the left. I have to go through this. Oh no. It's more like, okay, I can get through this. Yeah, let's dig in. Because there's not so much, competing for my eyeballs' attention. I know exactly where to go on the page. There's plenty of white space to give my eyeballs a chance to rest. It's subtle, but it's there to rest from one bullet point to another. The page flows very nicely and logically, and I don't feel overwhelmed, like I'm suddenly being attacked by an avalanche of text and details, because as we've been discussing up until now, a lot of times people put a ton of details into their resume that don't actually matter. So what makes for a skimmable resume? You want it to be easy on the eye. Easy on the eye means as much white space as possible. And how do you get white space? Sometimes people are like, my current resume is 2 pages long and there is no way to get it down to 1 page. There is always a way to get it down to 1 page. And one of the best ways to do that is to consolidate, and smush together pieces together. So I want you to ask yourself, as you're sort of going through and writing your resume, ask yourself, for every bullet point that you write, what is the point of this bullet point? What's the point of it? So for example, let's say you work in management consulting. Let's say it's supply chain consulting. And you've optimized the supply chain for one running shoe company, one agricultural company, and a mining company. I don't know. You could, if you did sort of similar stuff for each job, you could make it 3 different bullet points: the shoe company, the agricultural company, the mining company. Or you could consolidate it and say, I worked on supply chain optimization for 3 different companies where I did blah, blah, blah. And collectively, I saved them $12 million, right? That could be a way, for example, if you're doing sort of similar stuff and from project to project, consider consolidating those projects down into 1 bullet point, or anytime you can consolidate things together to get the point across. So this is an extreme example, but I do think it is instructive. So that's why I keep it in. And I have again changed all of the identifying information about this candidate. But once, many years ago, I got a resume that had the following bullet points in it. Underneath the college part, it had here varsity rowing, a member of the varsity crew team. I was the NCAA rowing champion in 2011. I won this race. I was named the best rower in New York. There's some sort of a rowing award that I won. And then, so that was in college. And then now, since the person had graduated from college, they had continued rowing. And then, so what am I doing now with rowing? Well, I'm a member of the San Francisco Rowing Club. I won 1st place in the Bay Bridge race. I'm 3rd place in the country. I'm an alternate on the U.S. Olympic team. I was named the most promising rower under the age of 30 by Rowers Observer magazine. Whew, man, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get a sense. Do you think this guy's good at rowing? Do you think he's good at rowing? I think he's good at rowing. Do you think this person needed to spend so much time making the point, I'm good at rowing? So many words? This is a true story. Part of the reason why I put this in, because this really happened to me. The first time I saw this candidate's resume, I started doing what any human being would do. I started reading and I was like, yeah, I get it. This is going to be a rowing bullet point. Yeah, he rows. I get it, right? You would do that. I would do that. They do that too. Yeah, it's a rowing. I completely skipped this line here. Alternate U.S. Olympic team, London 2012. So on the revised resume for the bottom part, I just had them keep alternate U.S. Olympic rowing team, London 2012. And that might seem like an overly dramatic and perhaps far too aggressive haircut. But let me ask you this. Is it not clear that if somebody is good enough to almost go to the Olympics, is it not obvious that this person probably also trains and wins a lot of races? Is it not obvious that they are probably rowed, that they've done these 15 different races? Of course, because you don't make it to the Olympics or almost make it to the Olympics unless you've done all of the other stuff. So let's clear up the space. Let's save it for that one. I thought this was the most impactful part, right? I see the word Olympics and I'm like, wow. So that's why I kept that one. So you're like, Maria, I'm not an Olympic rower. Don't worry. I'm not an Olympic rower. I'm not Olympic anything. I'm an Olympic Netflix watcher. But no, this is actually relevant to you too, because first of all, well, before we go on, ask yourself, for example, let's say you are leading a project and that project involves 10 different steps. Ask yourself, do I need to describe all 10 steps on the resume? Right? If you're like, I led a project that did X, do you really need to include, I had weekly meetings. At the weekly meetings, I wrote the agenda. I then led the meetings. We then adjourned the meetings. I then emailed everyone about the next meeting. Like, come on, isn't it obvious if the project ends and was successful and you were in charge of it? It's sort of assumed that you probably had to call a meeting here or there. So don't waste the space on the things that could be easily assumed. Another way to eliminate repetition, if you have been at the same company for more than one job title, a lot of people will do something like this. They'll sort of break it out. They'll have company name at the top, and then they'll have like, oh, here's my most sort of current job title, and then here's the more junior one, right? Here at first, when I started off, I was a junior whatever, and here's the junior things I was doing, but now I'm a more senior whatever, and look at the more senior things I'm doing. If you've been in like the same company with similar roles, I advocate stacking the job titles, right? Because for example, down here, let's say right now, okay, now that you're a senior, whatever, you're presenting the monthly analyses in front of senior management. When you were more junior, you weren't the one presenting it, but you were putting it together, right? You were using the machine with the curly Q plastic. So is it not clear if today you're the person presenting the analysis, is it not obvious that you probably know how to put together the analysis, right? Because most people can't present something they don't understand. So the fact that you understand the analysis is implicit in the fact that you're presenting the analysis. So what I suggest people do is usually, if you have a more senior job, put that and then stack the junior job title beneath it and consider eliminating these junior bullet points. Because again, I don't care that you were really, really good at something 6 years ago that you are not going to need to know again. And it's obvious to me as a reader that you were really, really good. First of all, number one, I don't care that you were good at the junior stuff for reasons we've already discussed ad nauseum. And number two, I'm assuming that you're really good at that junior stuff because if you weren't good, you would have never gotten promoted to the senior whatever title. So why waste my time proving to me something that I don't care about and that does not need to be proved because it is implicitly proved by the fact that you got a promotion. So by doing this, you free up a lot of space. And also very quickly, it shows right off the bat that your company likes you, that they have given you increasing levels of responsibility through increasing titles. So it creates like this visual impact right away. Boom, it's obvious I've been promoted, as opposed to up here where it's more sort of spread out. So then I get here, I move down, and then I'm like, oh, so they started as I get it. No, let's have them sort of hit them in the face with it right up front. And now this brings us to my last tip. I call it just checking the time to make sure I'm not running over. Okay, the real estate rule. So my real estate rule is as follows. The amount of space you dedicate on the sheet of paper for your resume to a job, an extracurricular activity, a nonprofit that you're involved with, whatever it is, should be directly proportional to how much importance you want the admissions committee to give to it. And what does this mean? I have seen, even as recently as I think yesterday or 2 days ago, I was reviewing a resume of someone who has been an entrepreneur for 5 years, but before that worked in some sort of finance job. It's something different, something kind of boring. And the amount of space on the resume, there was like an even amount of space given to the startup and then the previous job. The previous job was A, years ago. B, has nothing to do with the entrepreneur. Like, who cares? Like, they're applying to business school to continue being an entrepreneur. So why do I care that they had some low-level finance job 6 years ago? I don't care. So don't put even amounts. Don't think like, well, every job needs 3 bullet points. If your most recent job is the more impressive one, and if it ties in more closely to your career vision, dedicate more space to it. Similarly, if you've got, say, 2 different things that you've done in the community, right? You've got one that's kind of a minor thing, like, once a month I volunteer at a soup kitchen. But also, I'm a board member of a nonprofit, an education nonprofit in my city, and I led a fundraiser to raise $50,000 for that nonprofit. Don't devote 1 bullet point for the soup kitchen and then 1 bullet point for the $50,000 fundraiser, right? Make a couple of bullet points for the $50,000 fundraiser and then 1 bullet point for the soup kitchen thing, or consider leaving the soup kitchen off. Just like with your job, you don't have to list every single thing, community service you've ever done in your entire life. No, focus on quality over quantity. So as we finish up here, remember these. Hey, remember me? I'm your application. I'm the machinery of your application. Well, it all has to flow together. Super quick before I end, ApplicantLab.com is the online platform that I have created that guides you step by step, right? All of see these different gears, a lot like career vision, why MBA, resume, interview. If you look here, I've got career vision, why MBA. Where's resume? Resume is right here, resume, interview. And then the essay writing, I break out into several small steps because the resume is more important than the essays, but writing an essay is actually a little bit more complicated. It usually tends to be a little more difficult. So that's why I break that process out into multiple steps. But basically, there is an alternative to expensive MBA admissions consulting. You don't need to spend $4,000, $8,000, $10,000 or more. If you are a self-motivated person, and if you like the tips I gave here today, guess what? There's a lot more where that came from. It's in ApplicantLab.com. So here's the resume module, and the cost of Applicant Lab is only $299 for as many schools as you want. You can just add in as many schools as you want, versus sort of $8,000. And I put that because most people apply to about 4 business schools on average. So the average cost for a lot of these admissions firms is $8,000 for a 4-school package. Or if you're a self-starter type, check out Applicant Lab for $299. Don't just take my word for it. Applicant Lab was voted audience favorite in the HBS Alumni New Venture Competition. It is the only admission service endorsed by the Harvard Business School student newspaper. And check out my reviews on GMAT Club itself. Those are all real reviews by real people that GMAT Club verifies. So did it help in any way with your resume process today? If I taught you anything new or anything surprising, please give this video a like. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give me a don't like. That's great too. I need that feedback. Feedback makes it better and better and better every time, right? So I unfortunately do not have time today. Sometimes I have time to hang out and ask and answer questions at the end. Today, unfortunately, I do have a hard stop right about now, so I can't. But here's what I'm going to ask you to do. In the comments below, GMAT Club's going to let me know if you comment something in the if you ask a question in the, not like the comments on the side of the screen, but the comments underneath the video. Do you know what I mean? So if you have a question that I didn't answer, and I have a feeling you might at least, put it there. And then over the course of the next couple of days, I will try to jump back in and answer it. So thank you all so much for your time today. Yeah, okay, there for a second I couldn't see anything on the screen. I'm like, what happened? So thank you all so much for your time today. I hope again that this has been useful. Please try your free, ApplicantLab has a free trial. I also have a 7-day money back guarantee. So it really is a risk-free thing for you to try. And if you subscribe to the GMAT Club, if you hit a subscribe below, I think it'll be like right here somewhere. GMAT Club will actually give you access to a bunch of their practice tests, which is huge because, as we talked about, the GMAT test itself is about, I think, 20% of the admissions decision. So you do want to take your test prep seriously, and GMAT Club is a great resource for you to do that. So thank you all again so much for joining me here today, and I look forward to hearing from you and helping you all on your journeys. Thank you.